Hey guys and girls, this is Nick Romick. Check out my website at www.nickromick.com and check out my YouTube channel. Alright, subscribe, please. Helps me out. Anyway, today what we're going to be doing is creating realistic pool balls in Maya using HDRI and depth of field. As you can see in the background here, what I've got is a scene created in Maya, completely CG, and it's just pool balls. It's using HDRI and depth of field. Add a little bit of realism. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating the same thing, just step by step. It's going to require a basic knowledge of Maya and Photoshop. Really, I have the files. They are going to be on my YouTube link, linked in the description of the video. But if you really want to, I've included the PSD file as well, so you can edit it, whatever. So for that, you'll require basic knowledge of Photoshop, barely anything. And of course, you'll require the software. Alright, so let's get started. So here's my scene. What I'm going to do, actually, is I'm just going to save this puppy out, because we're going to start from scratch. Best way. So we're just going to start with a brand new scene. First thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to create a plane, hit 5, let's bring that out here, and we might as well start with the pool balls. I'm just going to create one, bring it up, going to make sure it's just touching the bottom there, otherwise shadows won't look right. That looks good. Maybe I'll make it a little smaller, shrink it down. Just going to use this plane here to line it right up. Go back to perspective. Okay, I'm going to hit 3 here. That's going to bring up the polygon count slightly. Just so it doesn't have such a jagged edge. It's going to have a little bit of a smoother edge when we render it out. Won't even see that until later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. And then I'm going to duplicate it one more time. Now I've got 3 of them. Plus, those are our balls. And I'm just going to pull up the hyper shade here. Okay. I'm going to start creating the materials for this. So I'm going to go with a Fong. I know it's a little shiny, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to name this one 8-ball. It is a little shiny, like I said, so I'm just going to drop down the reflectivity to 2.5 rather than 5. And that brings down a little bit of the shine because we don't want it looking too CG. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the color here. Now, for those of you who don't have ready images of pool balls, what I've done is I've actually created them in Photoshop. So I've actually created this PSD file and I've put it on my link here, so on my description of the YouTube video, so you can download that. It includes an 8-ball, it includes a 12-ball, and it includes a 1-ball. You can customize these, change them, whatever you want to do, because there's different layers there. Anyway, I'm going to start with an 8-ball. I have pre-saved them into a folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here and I'm going to change the color node, add in a file. This file, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate over to my 8-ball here. Open that up. Once that's done, I'm going to assign it to one of the balls. I'm going to actually hit 6 here. It's going to bring out the colors. What I'll do for one of these is I'm going to shrink it down because the cue ball is slightly smaller. And I'm just going to create a new Fong. Switch the color to white. We don't really need a texture image for this one. And I'm going to drop down the reflectivity to 2.5 or 0.25. Okay, and then we'll just grab that one there. So, actually I'm going to drag this one to this one. This one here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to call this something so I don't get confused. Cue ball. And then connect that color node. Actually, no, sorry. No color node for that one. And then this one here, we're going to create a new Fong. I'm just going to call this 1-ball. color, connect that node over to file, just like we did with the other one. Connect that over to one ball. So I'm going to position these slightly just because it looks weird if they're all perfect. So make sure they're not floating, which they are. Okay, so now we've got some more images here. I'm just going to turn the... So I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now we've got the balls set up the way we want them to. Okay, now next what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in the green. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a material that I have. You know what? I'll include that also in the description of the YouTube video here. It's actually an ambient occlusion material. So I'm just going to go File, Import. And I'm just going to grab this from my Maya materials, ambient background. If you notice it's red here, it's because we don't have mental ray enabled. Now, I'm just going to click on here. I'm just going to switch the render using to mental ray. If you don't see that, what you want to do is you want to go into Window, Settings, Preferences, and you want to go into Plugin Manager. From here, what you're going to do is you're going to kind of go over here and you're looking for mental ray. It's not named mental ray, it's called Maya TOMR. Okay, so now you want to make sure that's loaded and auto load. Both of those need to be checked, otherwise you're not going to get this functionality. That'd be why this is missing here. So with mental ray enabled, you'll notice that this is no longer red, which means we've changed our renderer to something that this supports this. And I'm just going to click and drag this ambient over to my plane. Ambient occlusion is something that picks up shadows a little bit more. It's not generally used for something that's photorealistic, but for this actual demo, we're going to just go ahead and use it. We've got a lot of depth of field and some blurring and stuff like that, so that's going to actually kind of hide it. I'll go back into my hypershade, and because this isn't green right now, we're just going to have to mess around with this a little bit. So I'm just going to change the ambience over to maybe a dark green. Darker. We have to change the diffuse to green as well. And just darken that up a bit here. Should be okay. If it doesn't work properly, what we'll do is we'll mess around with it. Get something a little bit better. So here we have our balls. And I'm just going to create a new pool cue on the grid. Okay. Now what we're going to do is, because I'm no pro, I don't manufacture these things, so I'm just going to hit Google. Just going to get a quick idea here of what these look like. So it's pretty straightforward. This one is straight. It's got a white piece and a brown piece on the end. So I know it's not normal of all of them, but that's what we're going to use for this reference. So it's going to polycylinder. I'm just going to pop the subdivision caps to 0. Going to shrink it down. Should be about right. Switch to vertices. I'm just going to stretch this out. We don't need to model the entire thing because only part of it's going to be in the scene. So I'm just going to position it over here. So obviously you're not going to hit anything else except for the cue ball. So I'm going to aim it at the cue ball. I'm just going to center this pivot here because it's giving me a hard time. I'm also going to change this so it's moving on the world, not the object. some issues for me there too. Okay, so what we're going to pretty much do is line this up as if we were actually playing a game. So, I'm just going to zoom in here. Still looks a little wide, so I'm just going to shrink it. Should be good. Just going to make these verts a little longer. Looks about good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of separate this a little bit. So I'm just going to use the Insert Edge Loop tool. Have that very end there. And I'm just going to grab both there. Not actually going to do any polygonal modeling, it's just because I'm just going to use textures to get that out there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to need some sort of texture for this. It's going to have to look real. So hit Google again. I've actually found this wood floor kind of texture. It looks like it would actually work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here, use the hypershade, wait for it to come up, and I'm just going to add a new, let's say a blend, because I don't want it that shiny. I'm just going to rename it here for the sake of simplicity. It's going to name it Pool Q. And I'm just going to connect the color node to an image. And again, that image is going to be, it's in my little folder here on the desktop. So it's called wood texture. I've saved it up. You don't have to use this, you can use whatever you want, but okay. Okay, so I'm just going to assign this texture over. As you may notice, the texture looks a little funky, so I'm just going to enter the UV editor. I'm just going to reposition some stuff. I don't really care about the end here, so I'm just going to zoom in here and move this up. And we'll just make sure we have everything. So I'll just move this out of the way because we don't care about the ends again. Zoom right in and see if I can grab this thing. Oh. Okay. Now, like I said, the ends don't matter, so I'm just going to put them on top of each other. This is the big part that matters. Now, this is kind of a sloppy way to do it, and it's not good practice, but just for the sake of this particular tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep making it bigger until the texture looks okay for me. There will be a point where it gets too big and looks sloppy. So I'd say about there. Looks okay. These ones, whatever. Okay, so got our pool cue. Looks okay. Now we did want to change these ones. So I'm going to launch the hypershade after selecting those faces. Selecting those faces will modify only those faces. So I'm going to create a Lambert. I'm just going to call it white. Pretty straightforward because it's going to be white. And then I'm going to create a brown part because that was for the end. Yeah, we're looking at a brown end there. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to create another Lambert because we don't need any shine on this. I'm going to call this brown, and I'm going to make it brown. Let's go with that color, maybe a little darker. I'm not too picky, so let's go ahead. I'm going to select these faces. I'm going to change the white to white by assigning that selection. Then I'm going to switch to faces again and select those ones and make the brown into brown. So now what we're looking at is a semi-reasonable pool cue. So now for my favorite parts. What we're going to do is we're going to assign a high dynamic range image, or HDRI, and we're going to do that by going into indirect lighting in the mental ray. Okay, and we're going to go to image based lighting. I'm going to change that image based lighting, and we're going to choose image name, and again I will link this in the description of the YouTube video. So let's see here, HDRI maps, and I'm just going to do this kitchen lat HDR. It's going to make it look like it's in a kitchen, but we're not going to notice. I don't really have any pool rooms. So that's been assigned. You're going to notice the background is a little funky here. Next thing, we're going to have to create a new camera. Just a regular camera. There we go. And we're going to switch the perspective to look through selected. Make sure it is selected, otherwise you won't be looking through anything. Now we do need a physical camera in order to add our depth of field. Okay, so I'm going to go to panels. Actually, I'm going to go to view, select camera, and then I'm going to open up the attribute editor. This is going to give us the option to change the depth of field. Change the depth of field here, and I've actually got on my HUD, I've got selected objects and distance from camera. It actually tells me exactly where the distance from camera is. To do this, click on display, heads up display, object details. That'll allow us to see our back faces, smoothness, instance, yada yada yada. But what we really want is distance from camera. Now this is going to tell us how far we should have our depth of field. Focus distance is the important part. Now if I click on this, it's telling me here that my distance from camera is 11.622. Now if I switch over and I select my camera with the attribute editor open, it's going to show me. So now I'm going to change that. I'm going to say about 12. That's close enough. Focus distance. Let's give it a quick render. And by quick, I mean switch the quality over to draft. That'll allow it to render rather quick. Okay, so now you're starting to get the idea of the depth of field here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to take that 8 ball and I'm going to keep it there, but I'm actually going to move the 1 ball closer. So, without switching my camera, I'm going to switch over to perspective, and I'm going to move this over here, just so it's in the camera a bit more. Switch my panels back over to the camera. You don't want to be messing around with the camera too much. If you get something that you like, you probably want to stick with it. So once you've finished, if you're happy with it, you're happy with it. If not, you can go ahead and you can add in some extra details, some finer details. One thing you may notice is that's not realistic about this is it is very CG because of the fact that there are no dents, there are no scratches, there are no any kind of marks whatsoever on here. Also, there's no texture really on the green there. So you guys can go crazy with adding, textures, bump maps, dents, scratches, whatever. If you're wanting to do that, I would recommend checking out on Google, or if you've got a pool set at home, take a look at your balls. Don't laugh. Just see how they look after they've been kind of hammered around a little bit. What you can do is you can add those finer details on there and get a much more realistic look, and maybe trick your grandma into thinking it's a real picture. Alright, so that concludes this particular tutorial. So if you like what you see, please leave me some comments. I'll take a look at them. Send me an email. Subscribe, please. That'd be awesome. Let me know if there's anything I did, anything that's annoying during this. Maybe I said too much, which I do. anything like that. But please check out my website, www.nickromick.com, and of course, subscribe. Anyway, guys, have a good one.